Before I start talking numbers, I just want to say that all of the figures in this list, aside from the runners-up, have videos on the channel already. So everything in the top 10 itself and all 5 of the honorable mentions, they all have videos. If you want to check out those videos, I will have links down in the description, and the top 5 will have their own cards that pop up in the corners. So if you want to check out the actual individual, more in-depth videos of almost all the figures that show up in this video, there you go. Hey everyone, it's that time of year again, by which I mean the end of it, and we made it through another one. Woo! But yes, as has become a yearly tradition, I'm once again doing a top 10 toy acquisitions video, this time for 2021, because as of this recording, that's what year it is. For anyone who might not be familiar with these videos, or for people who are and just need a refresher, this is a video about my top 10 acquisitions from 2021, not releases. What that means is it doesn't really matter what year the toy came out, just if I got it this year for the first time. Generally speaking, I try to stay away from things like repaints and remolds of figures I've already had, but I have occasionally made exceptions to that rule in the past, and I'm doing it again this year. Only for a couple of figures, though. And really, that more applies to some of the honorable mentions than the actual top 10 list itself. I want to start this off, well, I guess it's already started, but I want to continue starting this off by explaining that there were so many incredibly good toys that I got my hands on this year, both that came out this year and came out earlier than this year, that I kind of bent the rules for myself a little bit. So instead of doing the 5 honorable mentions, then the top 10, I actually have 5 runners-up, the honorable mentions, and the top 10, because there were some that I just could not keep off the list. But there were so many that needed to be on the list, I had to expand it to basically 20. So to kick things off, I'm just going to go through the runners-up real quick. These 5 are toys, figures, sets, whatever you want to call them, that I really wanted to put in the top 10/15 because of honorable mentions, but there were so many other things this year that I just couldn't quite fit them on there. But everything on this list is great. So for runners-up, we have Generation Select's Artfire, which I'm just so glad I finally got my hands on an Artfire. There is the Magic Square version of Menasor. I forget what the actual combiner set is called. I just know that I love it, and it's great because it's small, so it's only about MP10 height when it's combined, and it fits on my shelf, but it looks great and has a ton of options for display, and it's good. It's a really good set. I just wish I had the time and the energy to make a video on it, but there's just so much for it. There's also Robot Paradise Acoustic Wave, and I know this seems weird to put that so far back that it's actually in the runners-up, but it's a really, really good sound wave, and I'm far from a Fans Toys fanboy, or Robot Paradise, whatever you want to call it. It's totally Fans Toys. I'm far from, a groupie for Fans Toys, but Acoustic Wave is really good. And then the last 2 runners-up is stuff that I'm mostly excited because I finally got my hands on because I've been wanting it for so long. But first is the Giant Saber Railway Vanguard set. I've been wanting that set ever since I saw it because I love the trains thing, and I love the fact that the trains transform in really interesting ways to make these animals that actually all look pretty cool. And then they combine into these completely ridiculous looking robots. I am really glad I finally got my hands on it. And then lastly, the really glad I finally got my hands on is, you can see it right behind me, Mastermind Creations Feral Rex. I have wanted this thing for years. When I first got back into collecting, I remember seeing a few videos on it and thinking like that would be amazing to get, but I'm not comfortable spending that much money on a toy, because I just got back into it, and paying $100+ for a third-party figure was like, whoa, that's absurd. But once I got a little more comfortable with it, I was like, okay, I'm cool with getting that, and then I couldn't find it anywhere for an even semi-reasonable price. But I did get it, as you can clearly see, and I love this set. It has definitely got some issues, and it is showing its age, but it's great. Okay, I think we've blown through the preamble quickly enough, so it's time to move on to the top 10 proper. And number 10 is a really fun set that introduced me to a new series that I kind of got swept up in for a little bit and then kind of fell off of it, but I still really love this first figure that I got from it. And I did do a little bit of customizing, but not that much, and really it's just fun. It's a lot of fun to mess around with, and it's got so many modes that it's hard to decide what I want to display it in. You might have guessed, you might not have, but number 10, Dark Shinkalion from Shinkalion Z. This set is so much fun. Like I said, I love that it's got so many modes. The transformations they're simple, and yes, it's parts forming, but they're actually fun to do. And I love that you've got so many options, and that also makes it really easy for fan moding. I've actually got, you can kind of, I think, you can kind of see it back there. I've got the E5 Hayabusa, and if I wanted to, I could cobble these two together and make something weird out of it. And I just love how versatile the series is. Not enough to start collecting a bunch of them. Like I said, I kind of fell out of that after a month, but Dark Shinkalion is still something I'm extremely happy to have. Number 9 is a figure that I really wanted to put on the top 10 list from 2020, but I couldn't because it didn't come in fast enough. It just didn't hit the deadline. So instead, it is now number 9 in 2021. This would have been number 1 in 2020, but 2021 was absurd with all the good figures that I got my hands on. So because of that, Kingdom Cyclonus goes in the number 9 spot. I stand by what I said before. This is pretty much as good or surprisingly good a Voyager as like Generation Springer or Thrilling 30 Springer, however you want to look at it. This is an incredible Transformers toy, for mainline or not. It's fun, it's big, it feels good to mess with. I know how that sounds and I don't care. The transformation is really cool, and this is just a fantastic figure, and if you haven't gotten one yet, you should. And this is coming from someone who does not give a flip about Cyclonus in any regard. I do not care about Cyclonus at all, but Cyclonus as a toy from the Kingdom line is really, really good. And I think, even though he's not in the top spot, it does speak volumes of how much I like this thing, that he's still in the list, even though I got him at the very beginning of the year. He's lasted that long on the list. Now we're getting into the part of the list where it was extremely difficult to actually organize it, because, as I said, there were so many good figures that came out this year and that I got my hands on this year, that in another time, in another timeline, if you will, any one of the figures from here on out could have easily been my number 1 on any given year. It was excruciating to actually figure out how to list them, because every single one of them is fantastic in their own way. But I had to do it because it's my own silly rules. So number 8 goes to King of Braves DX Gao Gaigar. I have said before that I love the Gao Gaigar design. There's just something about it that really appeals to me, and I always wanted to get my hands on one, and I got my hands on one, and that made me want to get my hands on more. So I tracked down the DX version, and it is so much fun. It's simple, doesn't have a lot of articulation, but everything clunks together really nicely. It can do all the different modes. You can just slap Stealth Gao onto Gaigar, slap Drill Gao onto Gaigar without having to do anything with like adapters or anything like that. I just love this. This is a really fun, chunky, kind of almost timeless feeling toy. This is just fun, and the fact that I managed to get him with Goldie Marg was also a really nice bonus. Number 7 was a pretty recent acquisition, but it's still just really cool, and the transformation is a little bit fiddly, but it doesn't really bother me. It's more the bizarre, almost contradiction between modes, and you probably know exactly what figure I'm talking about now that I said that. But yes, number 7 is Mini-Force Animaltron Jaws Cop. I love how you've got this really weird-looking vehicle mode that turns into one of the most awesome robot modes I've seen in years. I know that sounds extremely overblown, but seriously, everything about this robot mode is just incredible looking. And the articulation's actually really nice too. Yeah, I did mod the head so it can turn, but everything else is really nice on this guy, and he's fun, and I like how unassuming his vehicle mode is. It's enough to get me looking at Mini-Force toys again, which I think is saying a lot. The number 6 figure, I feel like some people are going to be mad at me for having it so low on this list, but again, this is, first of all, my own opinion on all this stuff, which means, of course, it's fact, but also, it's, you know, just so much other stuff that I like even more. This figure is great, and I really liked it the first time I got it, which I believe was earlier this year, so technically it still counts on the list, but I just wasn't feeling the color scheme, and some of the background information on the character I just wasn't super enthusiastic about. But suddenly we got a recolor, and that recolor was sublime and comes with extra accessories that make it even better. And I'm rambling, so let's just get to it. Number 6 is Mastermind Creations Optus Nox. I'm just going to repeat what everyone says about this figure. It's fantastic. The transformation is actually surprisingly intuitive once you know to slide the legs up after you get the entire torso set up and not jam everything together and try and wedge the arms in. And you're left with an incredibly great looking Nemesis Prime. The fact that he comes with a wired cloak and a sword is, I love that. He's extremely posable. The articulation on this thing is just phenomenal. I said this in the video for this guy, but I will reiterate it here. It just looks so good in the black and kind of silvery gunmetal-y color scheme with like the bits of red and a little bit of teal. It's just so good. And I will die on this hill. Optimus Prime figures always look better in black. And now we're getting into the top 5, and if that last bit of the list was difficult to put together, oh boy, I was seriously sitting there for like probably a half hour to 45 minutes just staring at all of these figures on my desk, trying to figure out where I wanted to place them. And again, all of these figures are fantastic and they all deserve to be number 1, but this is a tiered list, so they're not all going to be. But number 5, if you can believe it, is Pose Plus Metal Gao-Gai-Gar. This is the first Gao-Gai-Gar figure I've ever gotten, and it's amazing, and it's incredibly expensive. But as I said in the video for this guy, while he is extremely expensive, I don't question where my money went. Everything about this is extremely premium feeling. I can see where my money's going when I got this. And something that didn't even occur to me until after the video had gone up, like maybe a month or so after, when I was just kind of looking at the figure, and looking at DX Gao-Gai-Gar for a comparison, I can't find screw holes on this. I'm surprised I didn't notice it when I was doing the video before, but I've looked over this thing a couple of times and I have no idea where there are screw holes on this thing. Not even the bottoms of the feet. This figure is incredible and extremely expensive, but I can't say I don't feel like I got my money's worth. I mean, I would have loved to pay less, but I don't feel like I got cheated here. Number 4 is another figure that came out earlier in the year and stayed on the list the entire time, so I think she absolutely deserves to be here. And I was just so excited when I saw that this figure actually existed, and was so happy that I was finally able to get my hands on one. You probably know what figure it is at this point, but just in case, number 4 is Mastermind Creations Eris Coulter. Their lady assassin that copies the abilities of other characters, I guess, and I love this figure. The transformation is really interesting and unorthodox. I love how the legs actually become the tank turret. The tank treads on this thing are incredible, and I really hope that whenever MMC does figures in the future with treads, they do that again. The proportions are great. The articulation is incredible. I want to say probably on par with Optus Pexus / Optus Nox. Eris Coulter is just great. This is one of those Mastermind Creation figures that I'm going to be keeping in my collection, like, pretty much for as long as I have one, unless random emergency stuff happens, and then I'd be heartbroken to get rid of her, but, you know, these are toys. They're not the most important thing in life. Point is, Eris Coulter is good. Extremely good. Now it is time for the top 3, but before we get into that real quick, I just want to acknowledge, in case anyone was wondering, you might see the Jinbao Devastator up on the shelf behind me, currently missing an arm. That is because I've been, over the course of most of this year, I've been working on customizing the entire set. It's not necessarily that time-consuming to do what I've been doing. I've just been doing like a weathering effect, but it's extremely tedious. And because it's extremely tedious, I've been pacing myself, but I kind of realized the year is almost over and I'm not done yet. So I finished up Navi / Scavenger the other day, and all I have left is Bulldozer / Bone Crusher, so I'm hoping I can get this done before the new year. We'll see what happens, but I'm so close, and I think it's going to look really cool when it's done. And I do plan on making a video of the entire team once I am done. I'm just waiting until I'm done, obviously. Now back to the top 10 list. So, number 3. I was thinking this one might actually have ended up as number 1, but I just couldn't with the other figures on the list. It's just so much good stuff, like I keep saying. But I will say, number 3 is hands down the number 1 Korean transforming robot toy I got this year. Surprising probably nobody, that is Tobot V Wild Chief. As I said in this guy's video, detailing is great. I'm not super into the alt mode, but I really, really like how it turns into the robot mode and you're left with something that's got virtually nothing, that's got no kibble on it. The posability on this thing is incredible. It's such a good figure. This is a fantastic toy in its own right, regardless of whether it's a Tobot or other Korean transforming robot toy or not. This thing freaking rocks. I don't know what else to say. Wild Chief is incredible, and I love this thing so much. Number 2 was a bit of a surprise to me when I got it, actually. I got it because I thought it looked neat, and I was kind of on the fence about it for a while, but then I was seeing some comments and TFW posts and other videos, and it was like, that actually looks really cool. The transformation looks manageable. Then once I got it, I was not expecting to absolutely adore this thing as much as I do. I thought I knew what I was getting going in, but once I got it in hand, it's great. This figure looks and feels amazing, and I've got a couple of gripes here and there, but every toy has its problems, right? So anyway, let's just get to it. So number 2 is Cyber Factory Starstorm, their take on the Bumblebee movie Starscream design. I love this figure. I absolutely love this figure. The articulation's pretty darn good. The engineering is really surprisingly nice, and the transformation is nowhere near as complicated as I thought it was going to be. I also love how this thing is solid in both modes. It's a little bit floppy getting between them, but when you're in robot mode, stuff is not going anywhere. When you're in vehicle mode, stuff is not going anywhere. This thing locks together extremely well in both modes, and it does some incredibly clever engineering tricks. Starstorm is amazing, and I'm really kind of hoping that Cyber Factory gives us Thundercracker and Skywarp decos of this, because I absolutely will get 2 more of these. Okay, now it's time for me to do that obnoxious thing that everybody hates in top 10 videos, where you stop right before the number 1 to talk about the honorable mentions. But I'm doing it. So first honorable mention goes to Hello Carbot Mobin, and that figure, as I said, is just incredibly fun. I love the spring-loaded auto transformation that it does, but it also legitimately transforms into a very well-articulated, especially for a Hello Carbot, little robot action figure. It could definitely do with a little bit more paint here and there, but it is just fun. It is one of the most fun figures that I got this year. After that is the Titans Return retro release of Hardhead, which I know Hardhead is not a new figure, and I actually used to own Hardhead, but the retro version, there's just something about it. The deco, the colors, even the non-face-plated face, it all comes together to make a figure that hits me so much harder than the original Titans Return Hardhead. And I really liked Hardhead initially, but this particular deco, with this particular arrangement, is, I guess it's just the best version of that figure. I mean, I'm sure there are people who love Quake that'll argue about that, but for me, the Titans Return retro version of Hardhead is the best use of that mold, and I love it, and I'm just so glad I got my hands on it. After that, we've got Tobot V Airhide, which I still really, really like that figure. I've softened on it a little bit over time, just because the transformation is a little bit clunky in places, and the weird shoulder setup makes posability, it doesn't get in the way of posability too badly, but it does make it a little bit more tricky. It's just nowhere near as smooth as Wild Chief. But Airhide is just a really good Tobot figure, and I really love the design. I love the split airplane cockpit over the chest thing and the wing cape. It's really neat. After that, there is Oblivion Land's Bounty Hunter Crevo. This is the other one that's kind of a cheat, because I had the Day 13 edition of the Astrobots Apollo figure in a previous top 10, and yeah, Crevo is basically Apollo, but it's got different accessories, a little bit of a different molding thing, and that paint scheme, I just adore that paint scheme. Like, Apollo was cool, especially the weathered version, and I really do miss the light up eyes, but Crevo's black, white, and red color scheme looks amazing. That new head with the openable mouth, pipe, the hat, it just looks so good. It's everything I loved about Apollo, but now even better. And last of the honorable mentions is probably my most recent acquisition as of this recording, which is Tobot V's King Fortran combiner. I will admit, I still am not a fan of that color scheme, especially what they did with Airhide. I just do not like that green and orange combination. I don't think it works particularly well with the rest of the combine mode. But that said, the actual design of the robot is incredibly cool. It's got a really nice heft to it. The transformation is fun. The engineering is actually really interesting, in particular what they did with Power Loader. And the articulation is also incredibly good, not just for a Tobot combiner, but in a general sense, the articulation on that guy is quite good, and he's very big and hefty, so that's kind of saying something, but the joints all hold up. So yeah, King Fortran is really good, despite the horrible color scheme. I think that kind of speaks volumes, really. If someone like me can get over a color scheme I don't like because I like all the other aspects of the figure enough to make up for that, I think that says a lot. All right, time for number one. I've made you all wait long enough, so I'm not going to do any preamble. Number one is Land Bison from the Brave series. I believe this was Brave Fighter of Legend Garn that this one's from in particular. But yes, Land Bison is my number one acquisition for the year for a couple of reasons. Reason one being, look at it. It's freaking awesome. The separation between the different bots, the colors, the actual proportions and design of the combine mode, it's incredible. Two, the transformation between all the different modes is really interesting and fun to pull off, and I really like some of the clever stuff they did with a couple of the, well, basically all of the central figures. It does some really interesting and unique stuff with that transformation and combination. And in some cases, the individual robot modes are also pretty interesting in the way they work. And three, which is probably the biggest reason why this is my number one for the year, is the fact that Land Bison was a grail figure for me. I really wanted to get Land Bison. As soon as I saw videos on this, I desperately wanted to get Land Bison for myself, and I just couldn't find one, or couldn't find one for a decent price, and I finally got one, and I think Drill Lander is missing a sticker. Oh well, it's not that big a deal, but I'm just so glad I finally got my hands on this figure, and it was basically everything I wanted it to be. Finally being able to get my hands on this thing and have it not turn out to be a disappointment was just an incredible feeling. So yeah, I'd say all things considered, 2021 turned out pretty darn good for toys for me. So that does it for my top 10 toy acquisitions of 2021. Hopefully I didn't disappoint too many people with it. Actually, surprisingly, a lot of the stuff on this list did come out in 2021. Not all of it, but a lot of it did, and that's pretty good for me, actually. But now I'm curious, what does your top 10 list look like? Or even just your number one toy acquisition from the year? There was so much good stuff that came out this year, and so much good stuff that came out in the years before this. There's so many good toys out there. Whatever your thoughts or answers, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all, and I am legitimately curious to know what your top figures are for 2021, because it has been a heck of a year, even if you only go by the stuff that came out this year. If you like this video or any of the other videos that I've made and you want to support the channel outside of watching the videos in the first place, I do also have a Patreon. It's just a single $1 tier, and that tier gets you early access to new videos, access to the occasional behind-the-scenes posts that I make, and eventually I'm hoping when I get enough people I can start doing polls. So if you want to have any kind of potential input on stuff I do in the channel in the future, that's a way to do it. With all that out of the way, thank you everybody so much for watching, and I'm extremely glad we all made it through 2021. I'm hoping, I'm not going to jinx anything, but I'm hoping that next year isn't quite as harsh for everybody. And well, seeing as how it's 2021 when I'm recording all of this, I will see you all at the beginning of the new year.